Bellator MMA is always on the lookout for top UFC talent, where they have already signed top fighters such as Gegard Mousasi, Rory MacDonald, Ryan Bader and many more. With some UFC fighters not performing well, as well as some fighters not happy with their contracts, there is a chance that more UFC fighters jumping ship to Bellator MMA next year. So for this video, I will be talking about 10 fighters who may sign with Bellator in 2018. Number 10. Going into his last fight on his contract with Brian Ortega at UFC Final 123, Cub Swanson had told the media that he wanted to test free agency as he wasn't happy with the new contract that the UFC was offering. He said that he deserved to be paid a lot more and wanted to test the free agency market to see how much he was truly worth. In his fight with Brian Ortega, he got wrapped up in a guillotine choke and was forced to tap in the second round. He said in his post-fight interview that Dana White approached him and was willing to sit down with him again and renegotiate a new contract. But if he's not happy with the second offer, I believe Bellator will offer him the contract he wants and take him on board in 2018. Number 9. Since losing his title to Rafael dos Anjos at UFC 185, Anthony Pettis has declined so much that he doesn't seem like the same fighter he once was. He was known for his exciting fighting style, where he would finish his opponents in a spectacular fashion. Since losing his belt, he has lost 4 times and has won only twice. I believe if he continues to lose, his value will go down, where the UFC may end up releasing him. This will give Bellator an opportunity to pick him up and sign him to their roster in 2018. Number 8. Erik Silva was looked at as the future world champion due to his impressive finishes in his first few fights in the UFC, but he would soon face tougher competition and would go through a pattern of wins and losses. As of right now, he is 1-4 in his last 5 fights, where if he isn't able to pick up a win in his next fight, I believe the UFC will be forced to let him go, where he may sign with Bellator in 2018. Number 7. In 2014, Renan Barão looked like an unbeatable force in the bantamweight division, where he was blitzing high-level fighters with ease, where he eventually became the champion of the division. He was stopped brutally by TJ Dillashaw at UFC 173, where he lost his UFC bantamweight title. Since that loss, he is 2-3 in his last 5 fights, where he has struggled to start a run again. I believe if he doesn't start winning his fights, the UFC will be forced to release him, where his huge name may help him sign with Bellator in 2018. Number 6. Will Brooks came into the UFC as the long-reigning Bellator lightweight champion, where he was expected to just run through the UFC lightweights with ease, but that wasn't the case. In his UFC debut, he was able to defeat Ross Pearson by a unanimous decision at the Ultimate Fighter 23 finale. He would next get finished by TKO by Alex Oliveira, and next lose by a rear naked choke to Charles Oliveira, and lastly lose by a guillotine choke to Nick Lenz. Will Brooks' UFC run has been disastrous, where another loss may cause him to be released from the UFC, where he may end up back in Bellator in 2018. Number 5. Hector Lombard came into the UFC as the long-reigning Bellator middleweight champion who was known for his violent finishes. He was also expected to just maul through fighters in the UFC, where he was being looked at as the future world champion, but that didn't happen. He has been able to only win 3 fights since signing with the UFC in 2012, where he has lost 6 fights in his time in the promotion. As of right now, he is on a 4-fight losing streak, where another loss may result in his release, where we may see him back in Bellator in 2018. Number 4. Gilbert Melendez came into the UFC as the long-reigning Strikeforce lightweight champion, where he was immediately given the title shot against then UFC lightweight champion Benson Henderson at UFC on Fox 7, where he would lose by a split decision. He would next defeat Diego Sanchez by a unanimous decision at UFC 166 and was given a second title shot against new champion Anthony Pettis, where he was finished by a guillotine choke at UFC 188. He would next lose 3 fights in a row to Eddie Alvarez, Edson Barboza and Jeremy Stevens. He is currently on a 4-fight losing streak and hasn't won a fight since 2013. I believe another loss will have him released from the UFC and will be picked up by Bellator in 2018. Number 3. Jessica Eye came into the UFC as one of the best prospects in the women's bantamweight division, who was expected to do really well in the promotion. In her UFC debut, she was able to get the split decision victory over Sarah Kaufman at UFC 166, but the fight was overturned to a no contest after she tested positive for marijuana. She would next lose to Alexis Davis by a split decision at UFC 170 and next picked up a TKO win over Leslie Smith at UFC 180. She would next lose to Misha Tate, Juliana Pena, Sarah McMahon and Betch Correia. With 4 losses in a row, she has decided to move down to the newly formed women's flyweight division, where another loss may force the UFC to release her, and she may be picked up by Bellator in 2018. Number 2. Jake Ellenberger was once just wrecking top welterweights in a brutal fashion, where he looked like a future title challenger. All of his talent was diminished when he changed training camps and never seemed like the same fighter ever again. He has suffered many brutal losses, and it is difficult to see him hang with the best fighters in the welterweight division. He is 1-4 in his last 5 fights, where another loss may result in his release from the UFC. With this big name, Bellator MMA may want to take him on board and sign him in 2018. Number 1. Johny Hendricks was once a vicious knockout artist where he was just causing chaos in the welterweight division. He was able to make his way up the welterweight ladder and challenge then champion George St. Pierre at UFC 167, where he would lose by a split decision. He next fought Robbie Lawler for the vacant UFC welterweight title at UFC 171, where he won the fight by unanimous decision, becoming the champion. He would next lose the rematch against Robbie Lawler at UFC 181, losing his title. He would next decline rapidly, where his knockout power and his brute strength was no more. Since that time, he has only been able to win 2 fights and has lost 5 fights and is on the brink of being cut from the UFC. If he does get cut in 2018, I believe his name value, and with him being a former champion, will be more than enough for Bellator MMA to sign him to their roster in 2018.